Hey guys, welcome to Haunted Tales from the Old Rocking Chair. I'm your host, Christina Spencer. We got a good show for you tonight, some interesting stories. I decided to log on a couple minutes early. We're going to give some people some time to get on before we actually get started with the podcast. As always, I'll be here the entire time if you want to chat with me through the comments down below. But we're just going to give people a chance to jump on real quick. We will get rolling at 7 o'clock, so we only got like a couple minutes. Actually, 3 minutes and 8 seconds before the podcast officially starts. So, I'm just making sure all the equipment's up and going and ready, and so we can get started. And don't forget, as always, make sure you share it out. If you want to do watch parties, I'm okay with that. Just, like I said, I'm just giving it a couple minutes ahead of time just to give people a chance to get comfortable and log on and share it out if they want to before the official start at 7 o'clock. So, make sure I share out to some page and share out to the Riff Radio Network before we get started, and to my news feed real quick. So everybody knows we're kind of on and getting ready to start things off here. Alright, let me do a time check real quick. We've got about 56 seconds, so less than a minute before podcast officially starts. So, like I said, get comfortable, go get yourself a glass of wine, and hang out with me for the hour. I do have some really great true stories. All my stories are supposedly true encounters. I'd like to do some creepypastas one day, but right now we're sticking to real, true story and encounters that people have actually experienced. So, if you have any stories, feel free to email them to me or to the Riff Radio Network. They'll make sure that they get them to me. Just make sure that you mark that it is for Haunted Tales from the Old Rocking Chair, so they can get it to me directly. Alrighty, so I hope you guys are comfortable. We're about to get started. I hope you have an enjoyable experience, and let's start it off here. Hold on, something. Give me 1 second. we go. There we go.
From everyone here at the Rift Radio Network, would like to welcome you to tonight's special broadcast. This work is protected by Creative Commons license. And now, a word from our sponsors. The Skeleton Key. This mystical shop, found exclusively on Facebook, is stationed in Blossom, Texas. Purchase all of your very own unique religious, spiritual, and metaphysical items, to include the beginner altar kits. Find them today on Facebook. Remember, you've always had the key. Come to Staunton, Virginia this fall to experience the creepiest place around. Take part in the Ghost of Staunton tours, produced by Marty Siebel and the residents of Staunton. Ticket prices range from $8 to $13. Private group rates are available. Learn more and investigate the tales of Mary Baldwin from the Mary Baldwin College, the Old Western State Mental Asylum, and much more. For tour times, ticket prices, and dates, visit their website at www.ghostofstaunton.com or call 540-448-2743. Available tour dates are limited and filling up fast. Make sure to secure your reservations for this fall season. Get out of the house and become a part of history. The Ghost of Staunton tours, only in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. CDC guidelines are followed, and for questions, please visit www.ghostofstaunton.com or call 540-448-2743.
Welcome to the haunted tales from the old rocking chair. And now your host, Christina Spencer.
Well, hello there. Come on in and get cozy by the fireplace. Let me get settled into my old rocking chair, and I'll tell you a couple stories. Haunting stories. Stories that are not for the faint of heart. Some of these stories may not be about hauntings per se, but nonetheless will haunt you. Because after all, some of the most scary things in life are not ghosts and demons, but the people we cross on the street. If you're brave enough, keep listening. If not, get up and leave now, because you'll never be the same. Don't say I didn't warn you. Welcome to the haunting stories from the old rocking chair. Something is in my apartment. Written by user pododysnefect -- I lived in my apartment for almost a year, and I've had several experiences so far, with one being a freaking constant annoyance. The very first day I was standing in my kitchen, putting a few things in the cabinet. I see a hand slide around the corner of the wall towards me out of the corner of my eye. I was about 10 inches from that corner, and when I looked over, it was gone. I told it that I'm not going to do this and to leave me alone. Randomly, my dog would look up the ceiling above me when I was sitting on the couch, tilt its head and whine until he would jump up, run away, or bark all crazy until I made him stop. The tapestry behind my couch would move randomly. I debunked it as not being the vent because of how far away it was and the direction that it blows. I put it on that wall specifically so I wouldn't have to stick it down at the bottom. The shadow people are back. Normally, telling them to go away would give me a few days or weeks of peace. They don't leave anymore. I'm losing sleep these days because I end up waking up in the middle of the night and multiple times at night to one standing by my bedroom door or by the bathroom. I was leaving the apartment once to walk my dog and turned around to close the door and lock it. My bedroom is a straight shot from the door, and what I saw still brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. It was the bedroom doorway, and it was crouched down on all fours. It was dark, like a brown or tan, but had the darkness to it, even though I had the blinds open to let the sun shine in. It didn't look at me, just started crawling towards me fast. I panicked and slammed the door closed when it got about halfway to the door. Luckily, I've not seen that thing again, but I also refused to look inside when I closed the door. I just trust that I've turned my lights off. Now for the annoyance. I know it's just messing with me now. This is why I'm posting this, because I'm just irritated. Something is in my closet. The door shakes constantly, and my dog and I have both heard scratching at the door coming from the inside. I have checked for holes for mice, and there's nothing. I have sent the dog in because he's good at finding mice in their nests. He hasn't alerted either. The closet light gets turned on. I can sometimes hear the switch, which is on the outside in my bedroom, click on when I'm in the living room or bathroom. I'll come into the bedroom, and sure enough, the light is on. I got mad tonight. I thought maybe I was just seeing things or things were just happening. I grabbed a shirt out of my closet, closed the door, and turned off the light. Y'all, I looked at the damn switch as I turned the light off. I go for a smoke, go pee, and come back, and the goddamn light is on again. I yell, I cuss, I told it to stop because it doesn't pay the frickin' light bill, and it was seriously annoying the crap out of me. I'm not even scared. I just feel disrespected. I'm the only one paying this bill, and whatever the frick decides the light needs to be on, no. Frick no. Even as I'm typing this in my bathroom, I just heard the light switch go on again. Mother fricker. True scary story from my hometown. Written by user Froggifeet. This story is about an old jail in my hometown. One of the smallest buildings at Grand Pacific Junction has a very colorful history, and it was built at a colorful time in history of Olmsted Falls. It is likely no coincidence that the old jailhouse was built in the 1870s, a decade in which many local newspaper stories included complaints about Olmsted's saloons and their patrons. Thus, the Olmsted Falls columnist seemed quite proud of this item in the June 27, 1878 edition of the Berea newspaper that was then called the Republican and Advertiser. The new jail is now completed. The structure contains 2 cells and 1 hall. What adjoining township can say as much? About a month later, the columnist wrote this in the July 25th edition of the paper. Olmsted Falls has a jail. and the same was christened on the 4th. This place has been furnished its share of criminals this summer, and with one exception, they have been punished. Although the community was proud of their new jail, it was a modest structure. In his 1966 book on Olmsted's history, Walter Holsworth wrote that it measured 12 feet by 14 feet. He said it was a wooden structure with iron bars across the window, a thick wooden door, and a plank or bunk for the prisoners. The ground where it stood is now part of a parking lot between Olmsted Community Church and the Moosehead Restaurant. Holsworth wrote that when Luther Barnum served as mayor, the jail's nickname was Barnum's Bastille. But he also indicated that it was nothing like the fortress prison known as the Bastille in Paris that was stormed at the beginning of the French Revolution. An inmate with a sharp pocket knife could have whittled himself free, Holsworth wrote, but it wouldn't have been worthwhile. Prisoners were generally released the next day and warned to get out of town or mend their ways. Barnum was the mayor when one unfortunate incident occurred at the jail in 1882. Here is how the newspaper, then called the Berea Advertiser, reported it in the March 2nd issue. A strange acting man entered the village Monday and requested to be put in the lockup, claiming he was being chased by somebody and asking for protection. Marshal Finch granted his request. In the evening, Mayor Barnum and Dr. Rose talked with him and thought his conduct strange. Said his name was Patrick Phelan. Had just come from Cleveland, where he had been on a drunk. Tuesday morning he seemed all right. Dr. Parker talked with him and thought he was recovering from a drunk. The marshal told him that the mayor would visit him in a short time and release him. Mayor Barnum went to the lockup around 9 o'clock and found him suspended from the lattice in front of his cell with a towel around his neck. The man was lifeless and a pipe was in his mouth. He was compelled to raise his feet from the bench he was standing upon to keep his weight off of them. He was an Irishman, probably 35 years old, was dressed well, and had a cheap watch with a silver chain. 1 week later, on March 9th, the Advertiser reported, the day following the suicide of Patrick Phelan, a certificate was presented for his remains and they were taken to the Cleveland Medical College. We are informed that 2 cousins from Cleveland, answering to his name, arrived at the falls on the afternoon of the same day to take charge of the remains of their cousin. They probably, having read of the strange affair of their cousin's arrival in Falls in the morning papers, they caught the first train, stopping at the falls only to find that they were too late. My experiences with suspected possession. Written by user B-E-N-N-Y-. I'm now 19 years old, who for the past 3 or 4 years has experienced a lot of unexplainable things, a few of which I'd like to talk about here, whether for answers or just to share with you. These experiences don't have any ties that I'm aware of, so I'll recite them chronologically. Never mind, after writing the story, it's way too long to add more to it, but I'll post other experiences if you like this one. My first run-in with the supernatural occurrences started when I was about 15 or 16, using a Ouija board with my friends. I've never been the kind to worry about rules, but something about the unknown signifies to me that rules must be followed. So even at this age, I was very cautious, or so I thought, with that kind of stuff. While originally using the board for fun with my friends, I started to become more interested in the perceptual knowledge the entity could indulge me in, turning it from fun into a deep obsession in a short span of time. My friends noticed the turn too, as it affected all of us, and we became hungry for more things the entities could tell us. We started asking about the future, if we would get caught sneaking out at night, if they knew our loved ones would pass away, if they had any answers on what our secrets were. Just stupid things like that. It was so surreal, but it was happening right in front of us. The planchette would move erratically and aggressively with certain combinations of friends using it and others observing. It would stop working when someone certain was there and maybe was a skeptic on the whole idea of this thing being viable. The entities would encourage certain combos of my friends to use the board at certain times, moving faster and clearer than when others used it. A lot of my friends became interested in it, with 3 or 4 of us being more on the obsessed level. This is where it gets strange. We started seeing smiley faces randomly appearing around us in random locations, sometimes on the car window, sometimes drawn into dust on old furniture in one of our basements, etc. They were differently drawn, which signaled to us who was drawing. There were about 8 main entities that spoke to us. At least that's what we determined from the info we received. But only 3 different faces. One was a smiley face with the eyes as lines, and one of them was a face with the eyes as dots. We had told the dotted eyes were from an entity that called herself Harry, short for Harriet. We were told that this entity frowned upon her full name and preferred to be considered a tomboy, but identified herself as a young girl. The other face was supposedly drawn by one of my friend's past relatives. I won't reveal the name, but they made themselves known to my friend, and we had no reason to doubt it. Now the third one started appearing after introducing one of my other friends to the board, and we used it at his house, downstairs in his room. His room was in the basement, which was finished and had electricity and all. Now this was weird. The whole experience in his room using it with him was strange because of the energy. The energy in the room was different, which I now recognize as the dormant part of me signaling negativity. But at the time, we all just felt the temperature drop noticeably, tingles down our shoulder blades, and attitudes changing from excited to anxious or more serious. My friend whom we introduced to the board that day started getting extremely angry and told us off, saying the board was fake and it doesn't work, and commanded us to put it away. He never wanted to see it again. We all looked at each other, but we did as he said, since we're in his home. Everything else preceding that, on that day, went on normally. The next day, my other friends and I are together, and asked my friend whose house we were at last night to come to IHOP with us. He agrees with a simple sure. We pick him up from his house to be greeted by a whole different person. Disheveled hair and clothes, never once cracking a smile. Bags were under his eyes, just completely out of character. He barely speaks to us as we eat, and we start to get concerned about his well-being. One of my friends asked him what was wrong, and he snapped at her, tells her to stop asking him questions and just to leave him alone. At that point, alarm bells are going off in all of our heads. There's something not right about this. But we don't think about the board being the center of the problem. I look over at the window, which he's sitting by, and I see a very strange smiley face drawn on it. Not strange in looks, but the moment I looked at it, I was hit with a wave of nausea and horror, seemingly coming from nowhere. This smiley face had lines, but horizontally, not vertically. I pointed it out to my friends, and their faces instantly go white, and I know they feel the same way I did when I saw it. One of my friends was terrified to the point that he just left, and didn't want to be around the board anymore. To this day, he says it's because he didn't believe in it, but up until that point, he was obsessed and attached to all of it, and I know it's just denial. After he leaves, the rest of us, we head to one of my other friends' houses to calm down. We get into the car, and we just feel my friend's energy turning into aggressiveness and hostility. So I offer him the front seat to try to calm him down. I really couldn't think of another way at the time. The moment that the heater turns on and the front window starts clearing up, an image in dew on the windshield just doesn't clear from it. And I didn't take a picture of it, and even if I did, I probably wouldn't have it by now. But it was right in front of that friend, and it was the most horrific thing I've ever seen. It was like a face with its mouth wide open, eyes closed, throwing something up from its mouth, but the face wasn't human. It was sort of mangled and looked to be under great pain, with things coming out of its mouth, Something tells me it was blood, but I can't be sure as it wasn't too detailed on the windshield. After we saw the face, we were blown away, at a loss for words, and my friend in shotgun just opens the door and leans out and pukes everywhere. He didn't even eat what he ordered at IHOP, but everything just came up. It was absolutely terrifying, and we don't know what to do until he asks to be brought home. We say yes, kind of glad we can separate ourselves from that energy. After that, we go to our friend's house, but keep seeing the new smiley face everywhere, and in greater numbers than we see the other ones. For the next few weeks after that incident, we shy away from the board, using it less and less frequently. The whole time, my friend falling in a deeper hole, starting from texts from his parents wondering if we knew why he was so aggressive, because he's been yelling and screaming at them for minor things, to him sending pictures to us of him crying and begging for us to help him because he felt so lonely. He kept saying something about she keeps telling me I'm worthless. She says I could die. She says you guys are talking about me. If you knew the guy, you'd know it was so unlike him. He always was a goofy guy and loved to joke and play pranks on people, etc. And he never let any living being affect him verbally like that. It started to become more void of emotion, and anything that would signify he was even remotely human rather than cries for help at that point. He would just send us random quotes and random numbers that didn't mean anything to us at the time. He would detest light and need to be in the dark in his room, and at a point begged us to give him a Ouija board, telling us he had changed his mind and he needed to do it again. He wouldn't eat or drink anything, saying to us that he no longer needed it, and that something else was providing him sustenance, to which we then thought he was possessed. He never used words like that, and he's never serious, and usually anything he said was a joke or playful. We called a church in the area, and they told us if he wasn't willing to receive help, then they couldn't give it besides the prayer and protection through us. They told us if he was abandoning his health, then we should contact a counseling agency or law enforcement instead, if he was a danger to himself or others. They also told us we could contact his parents to give the pastor permission to bless his house, but we declined because his parents didn't know, and he made it very clear that bad things would happen if we contacted his family about his well-being. There was no real conclusion to this physically. We didn't go to his house and dump holy water on his head when he was sleeping, but it concluded in a different way. My friends and I, during this whole experience, had been seeing each other in our dreams, almost if we could communicate without words, mainly with emotions, if that makes sense. I remember having a dream a few nights after contacting the church and seeing all my friends there surrounding our now okay friend. We were all aware of each other without really looking at each other, but I knew it was us, and I knew the guy in the middle of us was him. It was strange, as though something dark around him was beckoning us to move away, but there was also a pressure at my back telling me to step forward, almost like a battle amidst a dream. I noticed in my dream that one friend, who now denies everything that happened, stepped away and completely turned his attention elsewhere. But me and two of my other friends persist on stepping towards our friend as if we needed to. I remember putting an immense amount of effort into stepping forward, and once I did, everything was just light. Not necessarily bright, but it was a blinding light that you couldn't see. I woke up sweating and immediately got a FaceTime from one of my friends who had also taken the step forward, asking if I just had a dream. Me saying yes, we both were freaking out. We contacted our other friend and got the same response, and again called the denial friend, who was at the time still sleeping unbothered. The next day we got a text via Snapchat group from our possessed friend, and he was acting completely normal, like nothing had ever happened. He said, "What are you guys talking about, LOL?" Apparently, he either didn't remember the last couple of weeks or he was hiding it, because he said we were all crazy and that he was fine the whole time. He narrowed it down to him joking about it, which we knew was a lie. Even his parents knew the difference, and texted us saying thank you for whatever we did. To this day, everything is still normal. We are all still friends, and it definitely brought us closer together, except for the denial friend. He's no longer around. So what do you guys think happened? I have way more stories to sort through, but I felt this one I should share first. In a different post in the future, I'll talk about more of my experiences in the board and what it taught me. I have no way to prove credibility, but I promise you guys, I wouldn't spend my time writing a fictional ghost story. This is all how I remember it, and I'm still friends with the people who were with me then, so they can vouch. If you choose not to believe it, that's up to you. But anyone who shares a similar experience, I trust will know this is the truth. I still have questions about it to this day. If there's anything you want to explain further, please just let me know. I think I was at 2 places at once, written by user theyallknow. This happened just yesterday. So I'll wake up in the middle of the night, but I'm not anywhere. It's just a void. And then I feel this something. I can't explain what it was. Trying to tell me something, but couldn't unless I allowed it to. It felt wrong to let whatever that was telling me what it wanted. My instincts told me not to. Then it started manifesting itself in the form of unanimated objects. People, a thought, anything. Kind of like trying to convince me to let it tell me, but I never complied. Then from this point on, I was aware of my own body and was conscious. But at the same time, I was somewhere else. I'm sure it wasn't a dream. It didn't feel like one. So, in the other place I first woke up in this wooden house, in a bed right in front of a door that was never opened or used in this house. I don't know how I knew this, I just did. The door just led to the outside if opened. But this time the door was poorly closed and one of the lower corners were broken. I immediately told someone it had to be fixed ASAP, feeling extremely worried about this for some reason. Next thing I remember is I'm in some kind of line waiting for some guy who was sitting in a table writing something I couldn't make out what exactly it was. Sometimes he wrote letters and sometimes musical notes, so I don't know if it was like a song or something alike. While I was waiting, I looked down to my shirt and it had a name sewn onto it. Alexis. That's not my name. And then, when I reached the front of the line, I read it again in my shirt, and the guy says the name out loud and starts writing his stuff. So close to the table was standing a woman, and separate from her, but also close, there was a kid. Then all of a sudden I start feeling this dread from the guy at the table, the woman and the kid. There were more people, and I start feeling this something I mentioned before trying to reach in again. I left that place and came into an empty house with 4 more people that were talking about how tired they all were of that something trying to tell them whatever it wanted to say. After this, I'm only in my real body at last, and I remember the grandmother of a friend that's still alive and started shaking and crying uncontrollably without an apparent reason, and wherever I was before had no relation to her that I know of. During this whole process, where my real body felt hot, I was sweating, like the room temperature, not like a fever. And just when I could regain control of myself with the crying, I was no longer hot, and came to the realization that my thoughts were completely mine once again. I later looked up, and the temperature that night was at 21 degrees Celsius, so it wasn't hot at all. The experience would have been fascinating if it wasn't for the fact that the whole time I felt in danger while my consciousness was divided. So I texted my friend right away, as it was his grandmother that triggered my crying, to see if he could reach her, and see if everything was okay. And I told him everything with detail. When I got to the part of his grandmother, and I started crying without control again. And here's what made me be completely sure that it wasn't a dream. He told me where I first woke up. I described the room to him. It was exactly as the room he used to sleep in at his grandparents' house in another town since he was a kid. Even the broken bits of the door. He was going to go visit them that very same day. Later that day, he texted me again, and that's when he was just about to leave. A worker from the electricity corporation went to his house, talking to him about a problem with the wiring in the house of the vicinity. Then he excused himself to call someone on his cell phone and greeted the person he called as Alexis. My friend also told me that his mother and grandmother had something whispered to them before, even though what I sensed wasn't something audible or visible. I just perceived it in a way I can't explain. Nothing weird has happened again, and I just think all of that can't be a coincidence. I know this was a large post, so thank you for reading, and any insight of what might have happened is truly welcome. Can someone help me with what I saw? Written by Anonymous. Before I proceed, I would like to let you all know that I don't believe in paranormal things. I'm nearing my 40s and I've never actually seen something that can't be explained. The only other similar experience I recall was when I was 8 years old, and even then I believe that there's always an explanation for something. So I never counted the silhouette that I saw as a ghost or something because it was simply just too dark to see. I live in a rough area, so I always make sure to triple check all the locks, windows, and all other safety precautions that I have before putting my boys to sleep. I'm also training 2 dogs to be in defensive mode in case someone still manages to break in. They're currently trained to that point that if there's someone at the doorstep and they don't know, they bark as loud as they can, and they don't stop unless I tell them to. Just to make sure that my children are safe, I also keep my pistol right beneath my bed just in case of an emergency, because I believe in defending my children until the day I draw my last breath. Last night was like any other night. Dinner, we cleaned the dishes, took out the trash, watched some cartoons with the kids before bedtime. Same routine. The boys sleep in one of the 2 rooms in our apartment. They were trying to exhaust the last of their energy since they're still kids, so I played with them a little bit to get their exhaustion fix. My wife was sleeping in the other room, and I was enjoying the time, so I didn't bother to wake her up. At around 8:30 to 8:45 p.m., I hear someone or something moving around upstairs. The problem was I immediately knew it wasn't my wife. I know all of her movements after being with her for almost 10 years, and yes, that includes her walking patterns. I can tell by the steps that it wasn't her. Like I mentioned above, I know my routine, and I made sure that everything was locked and secure. I didn't hear the dogs barking, so I was confident that we were still safe. Sometimes one of my dogs, Marley, would climb up and down the stairs. I guess it's how she plays, therefore I immediately assumed it was just her being bored or something. I gave the door enough space to be semi-closed while not being locked by the doorknob, if that makes sense. I decided to take a little break and sit down, and I was sitting diagonally across the door, perfectly aligned to it. To my surprise, the door opened just enough for someone to take a peek inside, and there was a figure, looking inside my children's room. His skin was charcoal black. His eyes were dead serious, as if he was looking for someone or waiting for the chance to jump us. And I saw him looking at me, eye to eye. After seeing me, he slammed the door shut immediately. I stood there shocked, frozen, because I couldn't believe what the hell I just saw. I can't even tell if it was a man or a woman. All I can tell is that it was tall as the doorknob height and had a charcoal black skin. After snapping back to reality, I immediately ran to get my pistol, but when I walked out of the room, I saw my dogs were sleeping like nothing happened. It was like no one was there. I checked up on my wife, and she too was sleeping. I hurried and took the pistol to run to the main door, and everything was the way it was, just how I left it, triple locked. Next thing I checked was if anything was taken from us, but there was nothing. My motorcycle keys were there, my PC was there, the TV was there, my gaming consoles were there, and my wallet was there. Nothing was out of place. I'm not sure what to make out of what I've seen. I really can't describe it other than the features I've mentioned. I told my wife about it just this morning, and she said that I must be seeing things because I'm tired from work. But one thing's for certain. I know there was someone or something that peeped by that door. I'm so sure that I'm willing to bet anything I have on it. What I just can't explain is, how the frick did it get in? Or worse, what was it doing inside? Was it looking for something? Was it waiting for something to happen? What was its intention? Because I'm certain that it saw me looking at it. This is my first time in posting in these sections of Reddit, and I only follow gaming subcategories. If someone can please enlighten me, or at least let me know about what I saw, I would totally appreciate it. I like to hear similar experiences too. Thanks so much. (2021-01-02) 11:38 p.m. Written by user 43576372726. On 2021-01-02 at 11:38 p.m., I was driving home alone after leaving my significant other's house. I was on a windy back road after leaving a busy city. I heard a noise in the back of my car similar to a deep chuckle, which alarmed me, and I sprung in fear to look at my rearview mirror. I was frozen in fear when I saw a face staring back at me, with a sinister smile, dark hair slicked back, with his face pointed down towards the floor. I could hardly speak. I asked what he wanted. I could give him my wallet, whatever he wanted. He just outstretched his right arm, index finger pointed forward between the driver and the passenger chair, leaving the notion as if he was demanding me to keep driving. His arm was inches away from my face. Olive skin, and not a single word had been spoken. I focused on the road, as it was a windy back road with no streetlights, lawns, and hardly any traffic whatsoever. I had driven this road daily and knew that it would be 10 to 15 minutes before I reached the other end of it, and would be in some resemblance of civilization. I looked back up to check my mirror, and he was gone. I couldn't believe it. I slammed on my brakes and came to a stop. I spun my head back to check, and no one was there. I began to sob and cry. I thought it was a nightmare, or I was going insane. I tried to pull out my phone to dial my parents, but there was no connection. No service, no bars, no Wi-Fi, no nothing. I heard horses begin to screech and take off running in the other direction. All of my lights shut off and my car cut off without me turning the keys. I looked up, and the only lights on were my high beams. I saw the figure again. A male, black hair slicked back, mustache that extended to the corner of his lips, black trench coat, walking towards me about 30 yards out, and the same sinister smile on his face. His arms dangled on both sides, and his legs appeared to be a bit stiff as he struggled to walk. I began to panic and reached in my glove compartment to grab my Stoger STR-9 9mm. I reached in and fumbled the magazine. My hands were shaking terribly, and I quickly slid it in before loading around into the chamber. I looked back up, and he was gone. I stepped out of the car, tightly gripping and wielding my firearm with the finger on the side of the barrel. I was ready to slide to the trigger if I needed to. I began yelling for him to show himself, but there was no sign of him. I heard rustling in the field and bushes on the side of the road. However, it appeared to be the horses in the field. The horses were still running in the opposite direction in distress. As all of my car lights flashed on, I got back in, turned the key to off, and back on for the ignition to start. It worked. I slammed on the gas and got out of there as quickly as possible. I ended up driving back home, absolutely terrified of what I just encountered. I don't know what I had seen, whether it be a demon, a ghost, or my imagination. It reminded me of a childhood story I'd read called The Hook, where a man was actually in the car someone was driving home that wanted to murder him. It also reminded me of some of the old ghost adventures I'd watched with Zach as they hunted down demons and ghost figures. Till this day, I had no clue what had happened. I haven't even mentioned it to anyone. I'm afraid no one will believe me, and I'll be looked at as a psychopath. I now carry my pistol under my driver's seat and double-check my trunk and back seats before I get into my car. I have gone to a therapist, but haven't shared this with her and spoke of him. as of yet, but I'm planning to. I will no longer drive down the back road, and I will probably get in a panic or anxiety attack if I try. I thought I should share his story. Almost Kidnapped? ? By user GioZyphoro. Okay, for starters, this was exactly a week ago. I was staying at a hotel for a couple days due to personal problems. Anyway, this particular day, me and one of my closest friends decided to hang out after he gets out of work that night, which was around 10 p.m. The distance from his house to the hotel I was staying at was no more than a 5-minute walk. Literally, you would walk 2 blocks down, 2 houses on the right, and voila, you're there. That's very important for later on. So 10 p.m. came and he tells me to come over, and I walked there and got to his house. We smoked some blunts and hit some wax off the bong. We played some video games, listened to music, and smoked the night away. Once 1:30 hit, I told him I should get going since I had business to handle later that morning. He was clearly understanding about it and offered if he should walk me halfway there. I declined the offer since it was only a 5-minute walk. He walked me to his back gate, and from there he opened the gate and we said our goodbyes, and I started heading home. For more context, this area isn't as bad, but it also isn't that good. Basically, the borderline of the bad and good side of my city. Plus, the streets are beyond lonely at this time of night. On top of that, these streets are already lonely as it is. There are hardly any street lights in this specific street. Okay, so I'm on this street, turning onto the next street, which leads straight to the hotel. As I'm walking down the street, I suddenly get spooked off guard by a car engine that was parked right next to me. The engine was so loud, I'm sure it had to wake someone up. I started walking a little bit faster now. The car suddenly, with its tires screeching and all, full throttle reverse and does a U-turn. I'm shocked at this point because I don't know what to think. I'm stoned to the bone walking home, and I'm trying my best not to let my anxiety and paranoia take over me. I tried my best to play it cool as if I wasn't fazed by this, but what happened next is when I lost it. The person in the car with their headlights on rolls down the window and yells at me, "Hey you, where are you heading?" I looked back and I saw 2 people wearing clown masks. One of them showed me a knife, while the other just stared at me. Once I turned around, I booked it. I heard the guy screaming, "Stay still, stop, or I'll die," but I didn't care. I ran and ran until I got into the hotel. Once I reached the hotel, the car still chased me into the parking lot. I opened the door of the hotel, and as soon as I did, I heard the car doors open. I quickly got inside and clicked the elevator, and to my unfortunate self, it wasn't on the base floor, meaning it would take at least 40 seconds for it to come down. I had to think quickly. I was at the lobby. The lobby has a dinner patio type of thing where it is restricted due to COVID. I dove into that section and hid behind a plant and a tree. This is literally 10 feet away from the elevator. As I'm hiding there gathering my thoughts together, I hear the hotel doors open. 2 pair of footsteps can be heard loud and clear. I hear one of the guys say, "He can't be far, he just has to be here." The other said, "We should just book it. We know where he stays, we could just get him some other time." The first male voice then says, "Come on, man, we need to get one guy, that's it." Then they heard the manager talk on the microphone, and the next couple of words is what relieved me. "You 2 better leave, the cops are on their way. We have footage of all this. You 2 are stupid." With that, both stormed out, and I heard a car screech their tires and zoom away. The manager then comes out of the front desk office area and comes to where I am. He asks if I'm okay, if anything happened to me, and I said no. The police did come, and the following morning they asked me questions. I'm familiar with cars, and the car was a 2019 Dodge Challenger, black on black with tints on all the windows. The cops then told me if I'm 100% sure because that car specifically is linked to a murder 40 minutes away. A woman was kidnapped and found dead by a train station. The witnesses claimed seeing this car right before the incident was reported. That news shook me to my core. They told me that they would keep me updated, but I got no follow-up ever since then. Do I think the same thing could have happened to me on the lonely 2 a.m. night? I don't know, but I'd rather not know. I'd like to think I had a guardian angel that night. For those two people who chased me in their car, let's never meet again. Man in the Top Hat, ? Written by user RelationConsistent40. Just writing to see if anyone had a similar encounter. I work in a care home. Death isn't uncommon, but one thing that always pops up is the man in the top hat. Although we workers try to keep it quiet from the residents so they don't question it or panic. Initially, because I work in the care home for those with dementia and Alzheimer's, I always put them saying they saw a man in a top hat to be something to do with their illness. However, it began to change after I had many ghostly encounters in the care home. I only recently asked my shift leader about the paranormal activity at the care home, as I knew she worked there for many years and done night shifts all her life. She told me about many ghosts and who they are and what they do, but what stood out the most is the man in the top hat. My mom and sister also work in the care home. I decided to ask my mom this morning about the man in the top hat. She told me how it's deemed as death doctor and many people had seen it, not only the residents. Apparently, he's been seen at night lingering at the doorways of the residents' rooms or windows. Shortly after, the resident who he visits will die. Whether it took an hour, a day, or a week. Death would be inevitable for them. One story that stood out my manager told me was once she took a passed-away client to the toilet. She was fine, she could dress herself, feed herself, etc. She was a perfectly normal old lady except the deteriorating dementia. She began to go crazy and scream about feeling a worm crawling inside her and seeing a thin silhouette of a man in a top hat and black coat in her bathroom with her. She then turned back to normal, finished on the toilet, stood up, but then instantly just dropped dead. If anyone has any stories about the man in the top hat and genuinely believes in him the way I do, please reach out. Thank you. The House on Cherry Street, written by user WilliamHMorbid. I'll start with the backstory as I told my friend's girlfriend then, and I'll tell you about her dad's experience, then mine. In 1930s and 40s, Pine Bluff, Arkansas was still, or so developed. We had the mill, the sheriff's station, a general goods store, and some houses scattered about. One of these houses stood until 2014 in a dense wooded area smack dab in the center of a suburb that is now 6th and Cherry Street. This house belonged to the town's doctor, who gave cheap medical care to the hard-working residents of this small pioneer-type town. From what she told me, the town's bigwig doctor went for treatment and wound up being sexually assaulted and attempted murdered. She woke up during a chloroform doping and escaped. Apparently, his 3-story concrete house was placed about 40 yards from the city's first cemetery, and the hood doctor even had a giant oven he used for nefarious purposes. The father of the girl paid some sheriff deputies to lock the house down and set it ablaze from the inside, burning the doctor to death while tied to a chair. After, of course, cutting his balls off and burning him with hand-rolled cigarettes, among other things. Let's jump ahead 50 years to the early 90s. My friend Jamie's girlfriend's dad, a local plumber, worked for his father, the man who started the plumbing business, and they had a city contract to reroute the water lines and septic for Cherry Street and 6th. and those lines ran through a patch of woods smack dab in the middle of this new up-and-coming lower-income suburb. Her dad was instructed to go into the vacant house and find the shutoff that connected through the back wall. For your information, Pine Bluff was built like a crack house. Nothing makes sense. Power, water, gas lines, sewage, it's all messed up. He went inside, his radio in hand, looking for a short-drop manhole where the valves had been installed due to the main sewage being diverted to avoid this place in the 60s. Mr. E, we will call him from here, walked inside and roamed to the bottom floor. It was covered in graffiti, vines, mold, and charred marks with stairs where the stairs were burnt and nearly gone in a pile on the floor. Walking through the main hall into the kitchen servants' chambers, he finds the hole and radios back to his dad, and then goes inside and turns off all the water and septic valves. Standing in a foot of gray water, he hears something scratching around above him, and a loud, grinding, squeaking sound. He pops his head up and sees a large black door swing open slowly like an iron fireplace. Mr. E eventually told me this story himself, so I'll elaborate from his first-hand encounter from here. I looked up and saw this black oven door swinging open and got out of the hole. I walked over and popped my mag light and leaned down inside the oven well. There were what looked to be little skulls all inside. I don't know if they were real or what, but I left, and I frickin' walked out quick, and the door slammed on that oven as I hit the front door. So being me on the night, I was set to party in the woods like a heathen, so I decided I gotta go see this place. My buddy Jamie and his girl were down to ride after a little bit of convincing. I got them to go. It was about 1 a.m., We were trashed, I won't lie. We should have stayed in and just played video games. But this was something I just had to see for myself. Jamie, a devout Wiccan, was recently honestly against it, but his girl was a skeptic and knew exactly where the place was. She just was too chicken shit, I think, to even go in there on her own. We pulled up to a patch of trees and vines and bushes about 8 miles into the center of town. She hops the curb and rolls up to the tree line. We're here. Go on. I, being the young moron, I lit a joint and stepped out of the car. And I walked to the edge of the wooded area and looked around. Throwing up my arms, I finally see it. A chain gate just big enough for a small car or cart. I pulled the chain and guided them in with their headlights off. The whole area was filled with dead trees layered with living trees overtaking them. The moon was busting a hole through the clouds and my vision was doubled. I walked through the small path with my flip phone flashlight to guide them, almost running into the front door and getting smashed with a Chevy Cavalier. I threw my hands up and she just stopped. The moon shined like a yellow spotlight on the structure covered in vines and smelling of pond water, mold, and rot. The door was closed when I ran into it, and I suppose I could have jarred it, but I could hear it creak as I looked up at the 3 windows the home had on the 3rd floor, smoking my joint. I saw 2 eyes. Not cat eyes, not a coon, not a possum. 2 eyes that reflected Mother Moon back at me, like dry inkwells, black and empty. I dropped my joint and almost slammed into the hood of the car. I could hear Jamie and her laughing as I snatched on the door handle. I need in the frickin' car, I yelled as they laughed. So I laughed back like a nutcase and said, turn your frickin' headlights on, dumbass. She did. Look up and left. The doors unlocked. We floored it backwards, hitting baby trees and dead overgrowth in this tiny car. Black eyes and a white coat is all I remember. We don't talk about it. Hell, I haven't even talked to Jamie in 10 years. Me and that guy went through a few weird things. I'll tell you about my first and last Mardi Gras, and waking up in a Bayou Voodoo church after falling asleep drunk in a La Quinta Inn on the 3rd floor. I hope you all enjoyed all of our haunted tales this evening. If you would like to discuss any of the stories on tonight's podcast, I'm always live during and after the podcast every Sunday night starting at 7 p.m. Join our community on our Facebook group page and YouTube channel. If you have a haunting story of your own or artwork and you want to submit it for consideration for the future show, drop me a line on our Reddit page or email address. All our links are below in the description. Special thanks to Dark and Mood for all his wonderful art that you can check out on his Reddit page. I want to thank all our brave storytellers, for without them there would be no show. A detailed list of story credits are in the description. But most importantly, I want to thank you, the listener, for taking time out of your day to listen to Haunted Tales from the Old Rocking Chair. I hope you have a wonderful night, and as always, sweet dreams. Let me shush myself. Alright guys, that's the show tonight. If you would, like always, share it out so people know about me and about the show. Also, this is a Rift Radio broadcast production. Make sure you get a shout out over to their group page. Also check out all their other wonderful hosts that they have over there. They have some really interesting other shows if you want to check those out. Like I said, if you have any stories, feel free to email them to me or touch base with me on the fan page. Other than that, I just want to wish you a wonderful night, and as always, sweet dreams.